Well, Stephen, thanks for being on the show today, and man, for what you're doing in Morrisville, a neighbor of ours, planting churches, leading people to Jesus. Today on the show, we're going to talk about church involvement, decision making, identity, and I know maybe it's funny to some people. It's like, oh, you're two pastors, and you're going to tell us why we need to go to church. But yes, that is true. We're two pastors, and we're going to talk about why that's important. So let's kick off that way. I mean, you can mention briefly. You guys planted Triangle Fellowship Church in 2023 in January in Morrisville.
Yep. Launched in January, so just over 2 years ago, man.
Yep.
It's been a journey.
And you've been in ministry for a while, kids, wife, adoption, all that sort of thing. So let's talk about church involvement. Why is this why do you think this is important? And again, if the average person is like, "Oh, you're a pastor, you're just supposed to tell me that," what
Right.
do you say to that?
Yeah, that's the thing you got to address because obviously, yeah, people are going to hear two pastors talking about church, involvement and participation, and they're going to be like, yeah, well, of course, that's your
Yeah,
job. That's what you're supposed to do. Um, but it is good to think through, and this is how I have to think through it, Dylan, is all right, let me remove myself from being the pastor. What does the Bible give us in terms of what we'll call maybe your average attender or church participant? What should that look like? Um, I think as we look at the big picture right now, Dylan, in terms of the church in America, since what, the 1960s, church attendance has declined.
yeah,
So it's something that we have to give thought to,
Hmm.
like what's happening. We are at an incredible time of like wealth and freedom when it comes to the church in America, yet we're seeing significant decline. So there's things that I think need to be addressed, and maybe that's another conversation. But in terms of just thinking, you know, biblically, practically about attending the church and participating in a church in your local community, I think it requires good, serious thought. So let's say you move to a new city, new town, and you're thinking about church and what that's going to look like for your family. Um, I think one, it's got to be a top priority. The church is not, the thing that you fit into your calendar when you have the time to do it.
yeah,
And again, don't interpret that as, oh, the pastor. Of course, the pastor would say that. Um, but if you're listening to this and you're a Christian, I think we would agree that your spiritual health and your spiritual nourishment is of the utmost important thing in your life. And the way that God has designed that to really flourish is through the avenue of the local church. So, got to give thought to what church looks like in your life.
yeah,
Um, Feel free to cut me off. But so my point is start off with it being priority. Second, start off with this attitude of, okay, as I pursue a church, am I going into it with contribution in mind or consumption in mind? Um, I think it's almost impossible, Dylan, to escape like consumerism in our
yeah,
culture, even in the church world, right? Um, but we really want to make it a priority. And I encourage our people all the time, like, let's be about contribution, not consumption. The church does not exist to entertain and to cater, right? It exists to bring people into relationship with the Lord, relationship with each other, and see God glorified. How can we contribute to that? Man, beyond that, it's like, all right, what does this look like practically? Showing up, worship, giving, serving, like really giving yourself over to the work of the church in a way that I think should be life-giving,
yeah.
not life-taking. And as a pastor, I know what burnout feels like. I know our volunteers experience that as well. And so maybe you have something to say on that too. Like how can we participate in church life in a way that is not life-taking but
Yeah.
life-giving? That's the hard part sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
Go ahead.
interesting. I just think what you're saying. I try to be one of those people that's not like, you know, today's the worst it's ever been in human history, whatever. There's different
Yeah.
unique challenges and different cultural moments. One of ours today that you just mentioned is this very consumeristic mindset. And it's not that Christians are worse than the average culture. Our culture teaches us everywhere. And so there's very much like, I'm only going to go somewhere if it's a benefit to me. How can I get it? Whatever. So you see a lot of this. I mean, I saw this on video yesterday on social media. This lady was like, "I don't go to church anymore, but I'm involved with the Bible study, blah blah, because like I'm a follower of Jesus, but I haven't found a church that does X, Y, and Z for me." And part of it is like, again, if we're viewing this as like, I'm going to go there to how it can help me, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have preferences and shouldn't have desires and shouldn't like be fed as well. But if your primary reason for looking for going to a church is whatever I can get from it, you're never going to participate it in the way that it actually can be helpful for you. And I'm not trying to, um, like, Acts first century church. I'm not trying to say that was the best it ever was, because they had a lot of issues, a lot of
Sure.
issues.
Right.
But what you see in the scriptures is that, like, they're contributing and they're participating, and so of course it's not going to be helpful for you if it's just what can I get out of it. I'm going to go when I feel like going, and so I think that's a big part of it. Is I think some people just have never experienced what a life giving community can be because they've never like contributed, and they've always just been like, well, this isn't working for me, so I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, man, there's in some ways I can understand it because it's all you know. And
Yeah.
the American church has allowed that to happen for so long. And that's a part of my journey right now, Dylan. It's like, okay, I'm 2 years in. I need to make sure that I'm not becoming a part of the problem, if you will. And to your point, what you said earlier, I don't want to sit here and pretend like the church is in the biggest crisis mode it's ever been in.
Right.
I'm thankful for some mega churches out there. I'm thankful for the little churches out there. Like, I love the gospel ecosystem, even in the triangle where we live. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. So I'm not throwing stones. I am saying that there's a consumerism problem, and it takes discipleship to deconstruct that, because in those people's defense, that's how they've been discipled,
Hmm.
whether it's through culture or even through the church. Um, that's how they've been wired, and so we've got to come along and help undo that. And that comes through, I think, just faithful like discipleship and patience, and just faithful living. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It makes me think too, there's all these statistics of like, all these people who grew up in church and then they stop going to church when they get college or college age and move out. And I always want to point out and encourage people, that's actually not the full picture. If you actually like find out how, if you look in these studies, how they get their data, actually what's going on, it's what's happening is it's the people who grew up at church who stopped going, or the people who went once a month, Christmas, Easter, every once in a while. And so what happens is the parents have trained their kids to say, well, church is important unless I'm sick, tired to have a sporting event. And I actually feel like showing up. And so we're all surprised. It's like all these people live in the church. It's like, well, no, it was kind of like a consumer mentality. It's the same thing. I read recently a book called Get Married by Brad Wilcox. It was phenomenal. It came out last
Mhm.
year about why the happiest people are married and have kids. And it's like the
Mhm.
exact opposite of what you hear in the media.
Right.
And, I think one of the things we hear all the time is like the divorce rate among Christians is like 50%. It's the same as secular culture. And again, that's not true. If you actually, look at the data for like church going, involved, 3 to 4 times a week, give, participate. And I'm not saying if you do these things, your marriage is going to be amazing, but statistically, the
Sure.
divorce rate is significantly lower if you're actually participating, and not just showing up. And so, yeah, I think like
Mm.
for us, I mean, I can, you're probably similar. Like for me, like I'm a pastor, yes, 'cause I'm a Christian, but also if I wasn't, yeah, I would be deeply involved in a local church because it's good for me. And I always like
Right.
to say this too, the wisest, most mature followers of Jesus that I know, especially those who are older, they are all, without exception, and I know there are exceptions, but in my life, they are without exception part of a local church. All of them.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
And same here, man. But somewhere along the way, there was this attitude that was created, um, that the church was, uh, since going to church doesn't save you, right? Since it's not
yeah.
salvific, I don't need it. And that's so unbiblical in terms of like what God's designed for your Christian rhythms are. I don't know. I've heard people say over the years things like, my church is in a deer stand or out on the lake. My church is whatever. And I'm like, what you mean is you don't want any of the accountability, or commitment that comes with community. And since, you can experience God in nature, which you can, and I love, then you're just going to settle for that. Um, and that's a shame, man. Like that needs to be, I think, called out. Church is not in a deer stand,
Yeah.
right? Church is the gathered people of God. Um, People want the blessing of community without the commitment or accountability of community. I think that's a part of it. Um, to your point, what you said is even if you weren't a pastor, you would want to be heavily involved in a church. So would I. It's hard for me to even know life outside of pastoring a church in terms of
Right.
like what would that look like. But I would I would say that yes, I would be deeply committed. But someone who is obviously in the thick of it, I can see why. I can see why it's hard to be a regular attender, a regular participant, a regular contributor. Church gets messy, relationships are hard, it takes time, people's feelings get hurt, um, preferences, opinions, all of that. When you mix it together, man, I find that the church is actually one of the greatest miracles in the world because it just shouldn't work. It shouldn't work, man. With that many different kind of backgrounds coming together, opinions, experiences, all coming together, um, it just generally doesn't work out well. Yet here we are, 2,000 years later, church is multiplying all over the globe. It's pretty amazing,
Yeah.
if you ask me.
I think that, I mean, I think that's a good word. You know, we all know people, and maybe some people have said it themselves. It's like, yeah, my church is X. And it's like, well, it's not, because the church is the people. You can't, church is not an individual sport. So you might say,
Yeah.
that's my devotional area or whatever, but you can't say it's my church. And I think too, maybe going to, you know, the people that we think that have a lot of respect for, that are aged and wise, you know, one of the things in the scriptures, everybody, Christian or not, loves like the teachings of Jesus about like forgiveness, grace, mercy. We talk about this a lot at New City where I lead, and everybody likes them in theory until they actually have to practically do it. And
Hmm.
if you're not in a committed community, then you don't actually have to live in the way of Jesus. So we love this idea of
Yeah.
forgiveness until we have to forgive, or until we have to give grace, or until we have to be generous. And so what can happen is, obviously we were saved by grace through faith, as you mentioned, not by our works. It's not by effort. However, we can't follow Jesus the way the New Testament prescribes if we are in isolation, because then we don't have to do any of the things that we say are amazing. We just can like give it lip service and then kind of peace out whenever it gets difficult.
Right. And that's what a lot of people do, man. And the it's easy. It's easy to do that. The unfortunate part is you never grow and you never begin to flourish in the ways that Jesus has for you. And I would say in my own life and through just the observation of other lives, the most transformation and the most satisfaction comes through stepping into that complexity, that hard moment, pressing into uh, the discomfort of community, or just faithful, you know, one step at a time kind of living. If you're willing to do that, the blessing will far outweigh, the burden.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, we only see it as burden, and we want the blessing despite it. And it's like, man, you can't have it. Your soul will not get to a point where it is satisfied in Christ if all you want to do is throw stones and participate when it's convenient for you.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sorry. So, and to that point, Dylan, this just came to mind as well. In the day and age that we live in, online church is a big thing, right? So that's a whole nother kind of piece of this, which is really interesting to me. We record our services and we stream our services, and so I'm not like against that.
Right.
But sometimes I wonder, like, have we contributed to an isolated church culture? Um, and I think, just speaking on for our church, we're clear that like our streaming is for only a few purposes. Like if you're sick, if you're traveling, or if you're homebound, praise
Yeah.
God that we have tools for this. Um, if you're just lazy, or you think that this is a substitute for the gathered people of God, it's not. And we that's just our conviction, right? Like
Right.
we want to be clear on what that looks like, because I don't want to lead a church in a way that actually contributes to disunity or disconnection, really,
Yeah.
while I'm trying to preach committed, gathered believers, if
Right.
that makes sense.
It's what's hard, man. And I think to your point too, and I want to say for people, it is hard. No, hard is not, maybe gets you off the hook. It is easier than ever not to go to church. Just our culture. So we've
Yeah.
got entertainment, Netflix, video games at our house. So like we don't have to be around people to be entertained. Now we all know this. Like we've all been there where we don't feel like going out and being with people doing the thing, and they were all glad that we did it. But in the moment, we don't feel like doing it, and so I think that's part of going to church, joining a small group Bible study, whatever. Is like there are plenty of times, even for me, like we got community group. I was like, oh, I don't want to do this tonight, but you're always glad that you did. And so a part of it is just like it's just harder because we live isolated. We're all in our houses. It's easier to stay home. And then I do think it's interesting. We'll just talk through this in real time. wanting to reach people versus calling people to a community. So just like you, New City, we live stream, and we started doing it during COVID, like a lot of people did, because we started to invest more money into it because it looked good before, so we didn't do it. And as of we're recording this, in June of this year, New City is going from our own space to a school, and we are not doing the live stream. Now, part of that is it's a lot more complicated to try to figure it out, and so at least in the beginning, we're like we're not going to do it. But I'm also
Yep.
curious to see how that affects because I think it was like a week or two ago. I was listening, or it was a podcast or something about a ministry about like these people were kind of like saying, "Hey, why you shouldn't live stream a church," and they're saying, the vast majority of people who watch the live stream are your own church people, and I'm like, but well, yeah, because like if I'm like out of town or whatever, I'm gonna like watch my church. I'm not just gonna like Google some random church. So I get that. We have it at New City. So it's hard to know because it's hard to get real data on this. At New City, I've had plenty of conversations of people who have come to New City and have mentioned we watched the live stream before we came. So,
Hmm.
on one hand, it's easy because I know for some people it's like, oh, I'll just watch the live stream. But on the other hand, it's like I know it's reaching people. And then through conversation, I try to figure out now when you say live stream, do you just mean you watch the sermon later, or do you actually mean like the live stream itself? And I mean, there have been people that have actually mentioned the live stream. And so it'll be interesting thought experiment for us when we move to the school. Again, it's like hard to know exactly,
Yeah.
but in the back of my mind, I know there are sometimes just on comments that are like, I'll just watch from home today. It's like, well, now you're not gonna be able to do that. And so will we see a difference? I don't know. So it's like the whole, like you want to reach people, but you also want to call people to the community. And, if you're sick or you're out of town, it's awesome. But then it's like, well, are people staying at home? It's hard to know. It's hard to know.
Right. I know, man. It's hard to think through. I mean, we're a church who, we've got a website, we've got social media,
Right.
and it's like, I don't know, what if we just relied on evangelism and that was it? And it's like that should be it, right? Yeah, we live in this world where maybe, yeah, in order to reach people, you've got to enter into some avenues that they're engaged in, online, social media, that kind of thing. But there's wisdom, man, that needs to come with it. I
Yeah.
guess is the bottom line. Is
Yeah.
I don't like to draw super hard lines on certain things, other than like, yeah, don't stay home and call that the church. Like
Right.
you need to be in community is I think the
Yeah.
biggest point to be made.
Yeah. Because it's not an intellectual game. So you can watch a service, listen to a podcast, but it's not just information transfer to follow Jesus. We need community relationships. I don't know if you have a hot take on church attendance or whatever. This isn't necessarily a hot take. This has been an observation for me that most people, especially in our culture today, either eventually consistently join the church, attend, or they stop coming. So again, our church, New City is not big, so and it's anecdotal. It's just our experience, but I can observe maybe some things that maybe a really large church couldn't. It's like I've noticed over the years that if people are coming once a month, that's maybe going to happen for 6 months, and they're going to stop coming, or something's going to change, and they're going to get more committed. And I get it because like, what's the point? If you go to church once a month, you don't really know anybody. You might feel awkward
Mhm.
showing up, um, and so it's like to me, it's not worth it. And so I'm just like either it's like either do it or don't do it. But I think we can
Right.
lie to ourselves by thinking, well, I'll go once a month. I just think it's not very spiritually beneficial. So
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's like Pew Research or Barna or somebody basically, and this has been a number of years now, but they put out that a regular church attender is considered to be a twice a month person. All right, so that's kind of the bar now, I guess.
yeah,
Um, but yes, I agree. To your point, it's like it, I personally, I don't know. I don't think I would want to just show up somewhere once a month if I didn't have the relationships to hold it together. That's what I find is that
yeah,
if you step into the life of our church, um, what will keep you are the relationships that are formed. And that's why we try to emphasize relational community as much as possible. One, it's biblical. Two, you're made for it. And three, that's going to be kind of what begins to glue us together are the relationships that the Spirit really unites. All of it's all centered around, God's word and worship of Christ Jesus. But you need relationships to really hold those things together. So I'm with you, man. I watched the same patterns happen as well. So
yeah. Interesting. Real quick, been reading through Hebrews personally this morning. I was reading Hebrews 9 and 10, which of course has like the well known verse. I just want to read it because something really stuck out to me. Hebrews 10:24 through 25. says,
Mhm.
"Let us consider one another and to provoke love and good works, not neglecting to gather together, as is some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other all the more as you see the day approaching." And that's like the whole like gather together. Verse 26. Now, I'm not going to do the whole deep dive here, and I'm not saying verse 26 is just referencing verse 24 and 25. It's referencing a larger context. But verse 26 then says this about the after we need to keep gathering. It says, "For if we deliberately go on sinning after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins."
Mm.
Now, I, I was very struck by that this morning. It's
Oh,
not because we're having this conversation. I was just like, oh my goodness.
yeah.
Now, it's just talking about this idea of like, hey, if we say we follow Jesus and we continue to blatantly sin, no repentance, no anything, don't care, like you're not, that's like, you haven't really trusted Jesus. But I just think it's interesting that it's like, hey, you should be in community. And that's included, apparently, that's included in the list of things that you should do. That if you claim to follow Jesus and you're
Yeah.
doing it by yourself, you're probably not following Jesus.
Yeah, like one of the primary evidences of following Christ is participating in the community that he has established. And I say this often, it's not just me and Jesus, it is we in Jesus, right?
Right.
The New Testament and the church is far more communal than we understand. We're so individualistic in the context that we live in that we have reduced everything into just kind of individualistic experiences.
Yeah.
Not only is that foreign to the culture of the Bible, but it's foreign to the truths of the Bible. And so, yeah, man, I think any pastor we you ever talk to is going to emphasize the need for community. So I don't want listeners to hear this and think, well, of course, I mean, this is what pastors say. But if anything, I hope they can walk away with just like deep consideration of what it means to leverage your life for the kingdom through the avenue of the local church. It's going to be hard, it's going to be messy, but you will find deep blessing there that does not exist outside of the local church. And that is designed by God. Like this is how he has set it up. This is what Christ died for. And so we've got to really stand here and take seriously what it means to engage ourselves with the local church.
Yeah. Yeah. And my encouragement to those listening is if you're struggling spiritually, are you connected? Now, you might be connected and still struggling spiritually. So I'm not saying it's going to be, but I know a lot of people, might be. And it's like, but you're not connected and doing this thing in community. And so we shouldn't be surprised if we're isolated. Um, if this is hard for us, if we're doing this on our own. Last thing I would say on this
Right.
is, I don't know. This is not a new quote. I've probably heard it before, but I heard this, I guess, a couple months ago now, and I've been thinking about it a lot more. Again, different cultures and contexts, we can swing the pendulum different ways. I think Evie mentioned in American context, we're very big on grace, which is very true. But it's so much to the effect of like, well, I don't have to do anything. And I don't know some sermon I was listening to, whatever. And I know this was an original to him. Pastor was saying the gospel is not opposed to effort. But it's opposed to earning. So we cannot earn our salvation, but that does not mean it does not take effort to live it out. And so I think we're so much as like, well, church is the deer stand. I don't have to go. It's like the gospel is
Yeah,
not is opposed to earning, but it is not opposed to effort. So you got to
totally.
put in the work.
And
So
that's a good word. And
yeah,
that's a good way to, yeah, segue if that's what you're doing. But
yeah.
exactly, I think
Look at
we've
that. Oh,
kind
I
of put,
was. Yeah. Speaking
yeah,
speaking of effort, speaking of effort, I want to talk about decision making a little bit. How it's been for you. Obviously followers of Jesus, whether or not you're a follower of Jesus. Habits, disciplines, that sort of thing. You've got how many kids?
four.
Four kids, so a lot of kids, including your oldest is adopted,
Right.
married, doing this church plant thing. You guys, your church is moving into a new space later this year. Got to get all that ready. So I don't know. We could just start talking about decision making. What do you think about it? Why do you think it's important? Why is it important to you?
Yeah, there's lots of ways I think we can start that conversation, places we could go. I think decision making is so critical uh, at the pace of life that we're all living. If you're if you struggle to make decisions, I think you're going to find yourself kind of sitting on the sidelines. You know what I mean? Um, and maybe this is more geared toward pastoral leadership, um, because I'm not sure, Dylan. As I think about this, I'm not sure this is just blanket statements that need to apply to everybody, but I do think for pastors, um, decision making is super important. Um, One of the ways I approach decision making, first off, is, and this is been my philosophy for a long time, is I always tell people, all right, are you willing to at least put a yes on the table? before we even know what decisions we're making or directions we need to go, are you willing to put your yes on the table? Because that's what I see in scripture when Jesus invited the disciples to follow him. Like at that point, it was really about a yes or a no. And they were willing. And since they put their yes on the table, they went on this roller coaster of a journey that ultimately enacts as they turn the world upside down. So, can you start with a yes? If you can start with a yes, the Lord is going to use it. If you start with skepticism, if you start with, I don't know, I need to wait, if you start with, let's let this thing work itself out first, I, I struggle with that. I think you just got to start with a yes and say, all right, let's get into it. Um,
Yeah.
so, start with a yes. You know, uh, I'm always a proponent of take a step in any direction. Don't paralyze yourself through analysis, right? Paralysis through analysis, which is what I see happen with a lot of people. Um, take a step, right? In Joshua, when they were crossing the Jordan River, um, God commanded the priest to step into the waters with the ark before he parted the waters. Like, get your feet wet, take that step into the rushing water, and then I will make a way. And it's like, okay. Um, I think a lot of times we just kind of sit back and we just wait, right, until God
Mhm.
just parts the waters. And I think he's calling you to exercise some faith and take that step. Um, and you might not have all the answers, but take it anyway. And then see how the Lord works. He might keep that door shut, or he might turn your eyes to a different door that he's opening.
Yeah.
So say yes, take a step, and then be ready to be flexible and pivot. That's the church planting journey for any pastor or planter live like out there. You got to start somewhere and you got to just move. You're not going to make every right decision, but you have to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I can certainly, I'll be the first to admit that I've had to make a lot of decisions, and then they were not all the right decision, but they were a decision that eventually got us to the right decision. But we would have never gotten there if I had just sat back on it and not dealt with it. And so, um, part of this is how I'm wired. You know, there are guys far more gifted and better. They've got just bigger, a lot more bandwidth than I do, who are great decision makers that I learn from. But there's brothers that I know who really struggle to make decisions, which I think just kind of slows them down in a way that's unnecessary. And I don't mean that as like a judgment. I mean it as someone who fully understands that. But for the sake of like the church and the kingdom and your overall health, I think it's important to put the hard work in, make decisions in ways that are going to be beneficial, even when you don't have all the clarity. Is that
Yeah.
making any sense?
Well, yeah, it makes me think of, in the Bible, we read these stories, and first of all, a story might be a few verses, a chapter, a couple chapters, and it makes it look like things are happening really fast when they weren't necessarily happening fast for those people. And I think it's easy for us, especially if we read some of these stories, we know how it ends, that we forget that these men, these women that were going through these. I mean, Joshua, the Israelites. I mean, all these decisions. Gideon. I mean, all the stuff in the Judges. Anywhere, Abraham, Moses, whoever. It's like they didn't know how it was going to end when they were doing it. And so we
Yes.
can like discredit, well, it's like easy for them to do because it all worked out to the end. But like they had no idea. And that doesn't always work out the way we want anyway. But some of these stories are like, oh, that's so amazing that happened. It happened because they were like willing to take a step, not knowing what was going to happen. So my encouragement to
Yeah.
people like this is like, man, if you're thinking about something, it's God leading you to do something, you're considering it, and you're like, you want all these answers, like it's just, you're not going to know. I'll give you a story. I'll be interested. I think you can share some of your church planning story. I remember at New City, so we just celebrated 8 years. And I remember the beginning launch, first year, first 2 years, and finances are a huge thing for church plants, especially us. Like we had no outside funding, it's the whole thing. I don't really understand how we made it, to be honest, but we did.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, God, if I just knew that everything would be taken care of and everything would be
Uh,
fine, I wouldn't be stressed out. I'll do whatever you say, and it'll be okay. If you just can guarantee that New City will be here in 2 years, like I'm all in now, or like I'll do anything. Now, obviously, I was all in. But like my stress level was very high.
yeah.
um, and part of that is just life. I'm not saying it's like unfaithful to be stressed, but it was like I wanted to know everything was gonna be okay, and then I'll be like all in. I'll be good no matter what, and that's not how it works.
Yes. Right. And God doesn't want it to work like that, right? It's like then we've just erased dependence on God and
Hmm.
we've placed our dependence on the outcome. And that's not what he wants. Like what he wants for us more than this output is relationship, trust, right? Like intimacy with the Lord. Um, and so I definitely get what you're talking about, man. It's like, yeah, God, I really wish I knew how this was gonna work out because it is terrifying right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but yeah,
I'm curious, and again, I know everyone's situation is different. We're pastors, but still, I think hearing people's stories is always interesting. Um, I mean, maybe talk a little bit about your decision making to plant a church. So you guys were at Bayleaf Baptist. You can maybe explain like kind of what you were doing and like what led you guys to maybe take a step in this church plant direction.
yeah. So I was on staff at Bailey for 8 years before they sent me, and I started off doing college ministry. Transitioned into this role. I guess we can call it like an associate role. I was preaching every week for a Saturday night service that we had launched, which was kind of a new work for Bayleaf. Bayleaf's a big traditional church, um, and we got to the point where we're like, let's try to like kind of reach people we're not reaching. So that kind of launched this Saturday night ministry that I was heavily involved with. Um, and long story short, we get a new senior pastor who comes in, Jared Richard, and he's got a vision for Bayleaf, and he approached me in all respect for Jared. He had a vision, and it didn't necessarily include Saturday night service, right? And he was gracious in that conversation, and we talked through that. Um, and that's when I was at a big crossroads. In his credit, he said, "Man, I want you at Bayleaf. Would love to have you on staff here at Bayleaf." And I just knew in those moments, like I God is not calling me to, you know, be a role on this staff. Like I think he's calling me to pastor a church. What does that look like? Um, he and I start having conversations about multiplication and how Bayleaf can be a church planting church, especially here locally, and what that could look like. Um, in the midst of that, Dylan, I heard about a job at another church in the Triangle, and I haven't really ever told people this.
Breaking
Um,
news. Here we go.
yeah,
I like it.
uh, but I went through this long interview process with a local church in Raleigh for a role that I would have been, I think, pretty good at. Like it's just kind of in my wheelhouse.
This wasn't
Um,
like the elders of New City trying to get rid of me. Is that okay?
oh no, no, no,
Okay,
no!
good. Good
They
to know.
didn't. They weren't supposed to tell you about that.
Yeah.
Um, So I go through this long process, man, and it came down to like me and this other guy. And long story short, I remember where I was when it was. I got a phone call from their lead pastor. He said, "Hey, man, we decided to go with this other guy," and I was immediately relieved, and I immediately knew I need to plant a church because that was what was underneath all of my fear was I know what God's calling me to do. I'm just scared, and I know it's going to take a lot of work. Um, but I needed that door to close, and I needed God to make it clear. And as soon as I knew that wasn't what He had for me, I thought, I know where He's leading us, and so I've got to say yes. Um, and I had to deal with a lot of fear, and I had to deal with a lot of just unknowns. But ultimately, man, um, my actual decision came down to am I willing to be obedient even if it means I fail?
Mm.
Um, and every planter has their, you know, insecurity or their thing that might kind of keep them hung up. And it's probably different for everybody. But for me, it was like failure, a lot of fear wrapped up in it. And so I had to get to a point where I was willing to say yes, even if it fails, whatever that actually means, right?
Right.
Um, I will do it. I will say yes. And once I got there, it was wide open, and that conviction really set in, and then it became like you couldn't stop me at that point. Not because I was some like gifted leader,
Right.
but it was the conviction was there now. Like I knew it, and when you have conviction, decision making tends to come a little bit easier because now it's in your soul, right? It's not just somebody else who told you go and do this thing. It's like God's made it clear, so now I'm
Yeah.
going to execute. Um, and then everything else happened after that.
I think it's helpful too. I mean, your story included a closed door, and I think sometimes New Cities we're preaching through Acts right now, and there's a story Acts 16, 17. Paul's on his second missionary journey, and he's trying to go to Asia and then Bithynia, so these two different places. And we're not told how this happens, but the Spirit told him no. So we don't know. Maybe he was trying to travel and his plans kept getting frustrated, or there was I don't whatever happened for whatever reason. He tried to go two places, told no. Ends up going to Philippi and all these other places, Corinth, Athens, all this sort of thing. But that wasn't his original plan. And I think sometimes we kind of talk about like open doors, like, oh, God bless this. If it's an open door, it's from God, and if it's closed, it's not. And even like Acts is like, God both opens doors and closes them. He does it both.
Yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes it's His grace. In the moment, we don't really understand why. It doesn't make it easy. It doesn't mean we can't like ever doubt or be frustrated. But it's like it's like a garage door opener. So this is funny. I saw this illustration, so then I used it when I was preaching this passage. I held up a garage door. What is this? Everyone says garage door opener, right? Some people say a garage door clicker. Didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Nobody calls it a garage door closer, even though that's half its function. Literally, half its
Good.
function is to open
Yeah.
it so you leave and then close it. But we just call it a
Yeah.
garage door opener. But that's half its function. And sometimes there's a frustration that God's closing a door, or the door is closing, and it could be God, trying to wake you up to something else.
Yeah. 100%, man. I mean, when we were a core team, we had a building line that was, I mean, it was all right there, and then it fell through right at the last minute, and you sit there and you're like, God, I thought you were opening that door, and then you just closed it. 10 days later, He opens up a new door, which is the space we're in now. Fast forward a year, God opens another door. Oh, there's a building that we're going to move into. It was wide open. God shut it again, another building. And we're like, what the heck? Why are you playing games, God? Um, and here we are again, now pursuing another space. Seems to be open, but we don't know. And a part of that, man, is God working on my own heart and the heart of our church, right? It's like God cares more about how we trust and walk with Him than He does um, some of these outcomes. Not that He doesn't care about those things,
Right.
but ultimately, are we willing to trust God even if the door closes? Uh, that's what it comes down to, man. And He's working in me
Yep.
through this process as He works through our church. So yeah,
Yeah. I remember when I preached that message, I kind of like walked through a series of closed doors of how New City came to be. A lot of things that didn't work out, and even right
yeah,
now at Total Church, we're New City. Like I said, we just turned 8. We've always been in our own space. This summer, we're moving to a middle school, so we're going portable.
mhm,
And at least 6 months ago, when we kind of came to this decision, this is what we need to do. It felt like, and sometimes, in some ways, still does, feels like a closed door. Like why are we like in terms of like a church plant direction? It's like we're going backwards. You're supposed to start
uh,
portable, and
right,
then we'll go permanent. And to be honest, I would like by the time we move in, we're moving in June. We kind of started the process back in January. I would have moved in February if we could. Like there's a lot of reasons why our current space has been very frustrating to me and our church, and very expensive for what it is, and like it's well past time for us to get out. So grateful we're getting out, but it felt like for what we want to do, we got to buy all this new equipment. And we got to do all this stuff. We got to train our people. We've never been portable. I've been a part of portable churches in the past. I've never been a leader in one.
yeah,
And what I said and what I believe is like, I there's no doubt in my mind that there are going to be some people who, when we're in Pine Hall Middle School this fall doing our thing, there's going to be some people that come to our church, and it's not because they, like the preaching on the website or whatever, or even because somebody invited them. It's because they're going to see a stupid flag on the road, and for whatever reason, they're going to be like, I'm going to. The only reason they're going to come is because we're in that middle school, and they're going to have a conversation with someone. They're going to hear the gospel, and they're going to go from death to life because God closed the door. Um,
yeah.
but in the moment, it's like you don't know what's going to happen, and so
Exactly, man. And you're learning deeper levels of trust as you walk through those doors. It's now a part of your church's story, man, and
yeah.
that's a beautiful thing.
I want to ask this, just because I mean you're a parent of 4 kids, and your oldest is how old?
13,
13. Youngest is
2.
2. Look at you, man. You're all over the
Yeah.
place. Um, I mean, there's just people like we could never have enough biblically helpful parenting content to show people.
Yeah.
I think it's in some ways, I think it's appropriate to say this. It's more needed than ever because not because like society's like worse than ever, because we're so individualistic, we're so mobile, so people move away, so they're far. A lot of people are not near family that they grew up with, and so they're doing this parental thing by themselves, living in isolation with their Netflix on, and they need help. If they're not part of a church community, it's like, and you're trying, it's like it's really hard.
Yeah.
So I don't like have a list of questions here, but you got 4 kids, you're married. Like, what's some like wisdom you've learned over the years? If you're to talk to somebody whose oldest is 2 years old, And like, like what would you say? Things to think through, consider.
Yeah. Again, lots of places we could start and take that conversation. One of the first things that comes to mind is um, just because you have a kid doesn't mean your life stops.
Mm.
Like bring
Amen.
your child into the
Yeah.
life God has for you right now. You know what I mean? Um, and maybe it's because as a pastor, I've just had this kind of observation seat into lots of people's lives. And one of the unfortunate things that I see is like when a kid comes along, they feel the need to isolate or to stop everything and to reorient their whole life. And it's like, man, but God gave you this. Like that child was born into this. Bring them into this gift, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I get it. Listen, and so if you hear that and you hear judgment, it's not judgment. It is someone who has walked through that journey. Um, but man, I would say, gosh, as you parent, bring your kids into the life that God has called you into, and they're going to be far more blessed by participating in that than, you know, sitting at home on the perfect nap time schedule.
Mm.
Again, not anti
No,
nap time schedule,
let's go.
right?
Let's
But we
do it.
just have to
I
we
like it.
just have to be careful.
Yeah.
I think about my own kids. And again, this I'm a pastor of a church, so I get it. Maybe my situation's different, but Noah, our firstborn, who's 9, he was sleeping in the church closet on Wednesday nights. Literally, when we were doing college ministry, it's like, all right, bro, you're along for the ride. Wherever we are, is where you're gonna be. Um, and just last weekend, my kids are out in neighborhoods in Morrisville, running down the streets, hanging door hangers on people's doors. Um, they're in it. They are as in it as we are. And man, my prayer is that the Lord will just use these experiences to plant deep seeds that give them a love for the church.
Yeah.
So, I'm no like parenting expert. It's funny to like try to give people advice on parenting because I certainly don't feel qualified. But as someone with 4 kids, I will say this: you can do it. Like
Yeah.
you can do it. Um, you can move forward, lean into it. I know that you're busy. I know that it's a lot, but God has blessed you with this, and you can love those kids and lead those kids well without cutting out everything around you.
Yeah. Amen.
Um, keep saying yes. Step into it to the blessings God has for you, and bring them into it. That's how you
Yeah.
bless them.
It's so good. There's so many things I want to say, but I don't. I won't. I think marriage and kids, our society thinks like you have to settle down and stop. And it's like, no, man, these are some of the greatest blessings of your life. Marriage, if you get married, and kids, if you're able to have them, some of the best things you can have in your life. And it's funny. I'm probably not going to share this graphic. We're about to take a breakthrough from Acts and do 5 weeks on Titus, and it's basically like do what God says, what we're calling the series, and preaching on the church, preaching on what a godly man is, and then we're doing a week on what a godly woman is. So tomorrow I'm going to be prepping that sermon, and there's this graphic. And I don't think I'm going to share it because not everyone is married and not everybody can have kids, and so it's difficult. But it's like it came out last year. I forget who did the study, but it's a legitimate study, non-Christian survey that said that the happiest people in America are married women with children, and it's not even close.
Mm.
Not even close. And our
Yeah.
culture says like if you have kids and you get married, it's like the worst thing in the world. And I just want to say, like, I think that goes. This is my opinion. Part of what you said, like, take your kids, the perfect nap schedule. They all have to go to bed at the same night every week. I think our social media, how to be a good parent, with the I'm not in community, maybe not near my parents. I'm not with around people that have a lot of kids because our culture kind of like says kids are annoying and bad. That
Mhm.
people don't realize you're going to be okay. And then their kids even
Yeah.
missing out. Like I just,
Right.
our oldest is 10. So we've been doing it not as long as you, although I would say if you've got 4 kids, if you're not qualified to speak on parenting, most of us probably aren't in this day and age because that's more than most. Um, if we just see it, it's like I gotta have nap time. My kid has to be bed by 7:30 or 7 o'clock every single night. And so not only do like the parents miss out on experiences, like the kids miss out on experiences, and they're going to be okay. I
Yeah.
promise they will be okay.
Oh man, kids are incredibly resilient
Yeah.
and in awesome ways. I look at I can tell. So Noah was our firstborn. He's not our oldest, but he's our firstborn, and so he has literally from day one grown up in community and in just a pace of life that
Yeah.
has lent itself toward participation, right, as opposed to isolation. And and you can see it in him, like when he's at school. he tends to be a leader, right?
Yeah.
Not in a domineering way, but like he doesn't shy away from things. He embraces community. He embraces, relationships. Again, part of that's personality, but a part of that is because from day one, like we have shown him, we didn't even teach him, but we have shown him this is what it looks like to involve your life in other people's lives. This is what it looks like to sacrifice your time, for other people. This is what it looks like when someone, you know, disagrees with you. Um, and that's a whole nother conversation, man. Like our kids having to walk through the hard moments of church life with
Mhm.
us is
Yeah.
another thing. But yeah, man, I hope people can hear this and not hear judgment or condemnation, because when you're a first time parent, especially, it's overwhelming
Yeah.
and there's a lot of unknowns. But I hope you can hear this voice. Keep going, like step into it, bring your kids into it, and it will bless them.
Yeah.
It's not selfish, it's a blessing.
Yeah. And I would just say too, again, if you're a new parent and you're overwhelmed, what you're hearing is no one can touch the kid because they're going to get sick. You got to have all the nap times, all the bedtimes. You're hearing don't do anything, and you should be hearing
Yeah.
do the hard things. One of the big pieces of advice that Christine and I give to every first time parent is you need to go on a date night within the first month without your child. You have
Yeah.
to, because what happens is like, again, I'm not trying to be, you know, condemning or judgmental or whatever. Just as usual, wisdom principles, there are exceptions to every rule. I get it. But what happens is like if you never like have time without your kids, then it becomes a year, then it becomes 2 years. All of a sudden it's like 3 or 4 years, 5 years, and like you never had a night away from your kids. And it's just like
Right.
that's not healthy for you or for your kids. It's like, and it's not just because like maybe you can't, but it's like you won't, you're physically unwilling to do it. And it's like, man, that's
Right. And
not
that's it's like I get like there's a lot of people who've moved here from other
right.
cities. They have nobody to watch their kids
Right.
and they're not comfortable with that. So I get that. But yeah, the unwillingness is where I would push back and challenge a little bit. If you can, yeah, I would say do it.
Yeah. So I want one more because again, you're 4 kids, 13 years old. You've been doing a lot. So I love the like nap time. Let's not just do this forever and involve your kids. I mean, give me one more thing. Like again, maybe advice to first time parents, maybe something you would do differently that maybe goes against conventional cultural wisdom, but is actually good for you and your kids.
Um, yeah, I like to so much of what maybe this is in the same vein. I'll try to say two different things here, but so much of what we learn as kids is caught, not taught, right? And so that's why I'm big on bringing them in. I look at my parents and I'm like, man, I absorbed a lot, for better or for worse, right? For thankfully for me, it was a lot of good, and I want my kids to absorb. So just trying to include them in things, include them in what you are already doing, I think is a huge thing. I guess my mind's going a couple of places, but I'll shift. One of the things that I've been challenged with lately is being not just physically present, but emotionally present and present in every way. And that's, I guess, not a hot take, Dylan. It's
Mm.
probably just generally good advice. But I right now have the voices of older folks in my ear who have, their kids are grown now and they're looking at me and saying, don't waste that moment. Um,
Mm.
every night my kids want something from me, a wrestling match,
Right.
playing dinosaurs on the ground, going outside and playing baseball. And I'm generally like too tired, but it's the voices in my head that are saying, hey, this won't be forever. And those are the voices that get me on the floor, on all fours, or they get me into the wrestling match. And so, um, I guess my advice would be evaluate what you're saying yes and no to, and every chance you can say yes to your kids that is beneficial, do it. Like,
You know what's interesting? It goes with the saying yes, because I agree. It's like, man, I'm tired. I don't feel like doing this, but it matters. Also, what I've noticed with our kids, screen time's like a big thing, whatever. And so you have limits,
uh,
that sort of thing. But almost every single time, if my kids are on a screen doing something and I offer, hey, you want to go do this? You want to go play? They always say yes. And
yeah,
I think that just shows parents, men, women, I think especially dads, because we're hardwired to play and do things. It's like they want it. And it's just funny to me. It's like
yeah.
Roman, like he like a little Nintendo Switch. He likes to play sometimes, whatever.
Mhm.
But like nine and a half times out of 10, he'll put that thing down to go play with his dad. And so sometimes it's on us to initiate it too, you know. And so I think that's really good.
Yeah,
So helpful.
100%. Yeah, I don't have hot takes on screen time and stuff like that. Like,
Yep.
I don't, bro, I don't care. Like, yeah, don't put your kid in front of a screen like, 14 hours a day. I know that's a big topic for some people, but like, I don't know, sometimes you need to just turn on an episode of Bluey or something.
That's right. That's great. Man, that's really helpful. You know, with the rest of our time, I want to talk a little bit just about identity in our culture. You know, topics change. You know, how people describe things. Identity is kind of a big, you know, topic of discussion, a word that we use a lot these days. And so we can find our identity in our sexuality or ethnicity or job or career, all these type of things. And really, we're told like to be your true self, you have to find your identity in X, Y, and Z and that sort of thing. Yeah, what's your take on identity? How can we like see through biblical lens, a healthy lens, to be more like Jesus?
Yeah. Man, that might be one of the biggest topics of the day, right? In an individualistic culture, identity begins to boil down to individualism. And when God is removed from that, then yeah, we're going to search for it in all kinds of ways. Um, and we're seeing that unfold before our eyes in ways we never thought we would see,
Mm.
right? In terms of gender and sexuality, even it's like identity has gotten to the point now where we're completely removing even logic and rationale from any of
Yeah,
this, right? As just this desperate pursuit of identity. And I think when the enemy can start really erasing or eroding foundations of identity, I mean, he can get you to do anything. So, like, a lot of this comes back to identity, I think. And so it's super important that you give clear biblical thought to what your identity is. Who are you? I mean, that's an important question to really come to a clear answer on. Um, and the Sunday school answer is ultimately you are a child of God, right? You're a son or a daughter of the King. Articulating that is one thing, knowing that in your soul is another thing. Which points us back to earlier conversations, right? Your
yeah,
identity has to, I mean, it's going to be reinforced through the community that you root yourself in the church. But yeah, I was just preaching on John 13 this past weekend, and where Jesus washes the feet of the
mm,
disciples. And there's this kind of interesting way I think John goes about highlighting that moment, because he starts that moment not with the action of selfless service and humility on Jesus's part, but he starts it with calling out the fact that Jesus is about to die on the cross. Judas is about to betray him. So he starts off with pain. Like, here's the pain that is like in his heart right now and in his mind. The next verse, verse 3, he transitioned and he's like, Jesus knew who he was and what he came to do. He's the
mm,
Son of God and he's going back to God. Okay, that seems random, because the very next verse says, so he got down on his knees, he tied a towel around his waist, and he washed the feet of the disciples. And it's like, well, that's interesting, man. You started off with all this pain that's just swirling in him, but that didn't stop him. You went immediately to purpose, like who he is, what he's doing. And out of that purpose, he can serve and he can love and he can pour out.
mm.
Um, and I think about our own lives. So many of us are walking around with weights, pains, trauma, just hard moments. We're weary people. And the enemy's doing a great job at using those weights to just kind of keep us irrelevant. And I get it, man. Like, I'm not dismissing somebody's pain, but you have to call them on your purpose and your identity, which is what John highlighted there in verse 3. Like, Jesus knew who he was and what he was doing. And because he was so
Yeah,
anchored in that, he can still love others. He can still pour out. He can still move forward. He can still get to the cross. So if you lose sight of who you are, all you'll do is search for it in
mm,
anything and everything. But if you know who you are, you will be an unstoppable force for the kingdom of God, because now you got nothing to prove to yourself or to anybody else.
yeah.
So identity is super important, man.
I think it's so helpful, like know who you are. Now, knowing who you are, someone can say, "Well, I'm not Jesus." I get it, and maybe you don't know all the things that you maybe want to do, but at least knowing who you are, like for Jesus, like he can serve, he could take betrayal because he wasn't tight, like he knew who he was. And I
Yeah.
just think to me, it's so funny in our culture, this whole idea of searching for yourself. Because I'm like, guys, what is this? First of all, that doesn't mean anything. I'm gonna go find myself. I was like, okay. Well, how do you know if you found it? I mean, how do you know? And then if you change, then what happens? So like this, like I'm gonna go. I'm not saying like it's bad to like take some time to reflect, whatever. But I'm gonna go do this thing. I'm gonna find myself or whatever. It's like you don't. That's not how you don't know if you found it. And then what happens when life happens, and 6 months later, we're all different. I mean, no one's the same last year, 5 years ago, a decade ago than we're today. So then, like, you got to find yourself again. Like, it's like a never ending pursuit if
Right.
you don't know who God is and who he, that you are made in His image and you're a child of God. It's like it's you can't find it. It's like it's literally impossible to find.
Yeah. No. 100%. And that's what I'm saying. It's like we're watching people search and find it in places that will ultimately not satisfy. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like you're going to spend your life doing that, or you can spend your life investing in eternity. And you can only do that when you know like who you are. Right. So super important.
Yeah. I don't know. Again, I'm going back to kids or maybe even your church. Any just like for wisdom for people that like, yeah, I guess I agree. I mean, I get it. I know like God's created me, but like when you talk about identity with people or just things, wisdom, principles to think about, I don't know anything else on that topic.
Well, it's, yeah, I think most of us are just kind of afraid to do the hard work of solidifying identity because it means you're going to really have to deal with yourself in ways that you probably
Mhm.
don't want to. And you're going to have to face your fears, your failures, all of it. Um, and most of us just don't want to. And
Yeah.
so we're just kind of comfortable living on the surface of kind of knowing who we are without actually like really being able to put in the hard work that comes with confession, that comes with
Mhm.
repentance, that comes with accountability. All of those are critical when it comes to solidifying your identity in Christ. But in a culture where man, distraction and escapism is incredibly easy. Um, Not a lot of folks are going to sit around and contemplate these things or enter into meditation
Yeah.
or reflection in ways that will actually confront them. And
Yeah.
and that's the hard part, man. If you're not willing to be confronted by the gospel, by Jesus, I don't know. I don't think you can ever actually get to your true identity.
Yeah. That's good. Well, man, Stephen, thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for the wisdom today. Again, I would just like part of finding out who you are is doing it in a community. And so you should, if you follow Jesus, join a local church. If you want to know God better, you should join a local church and work all this out in community. Ask questions. Stephen, thanks for the time. Grateful for what you're doing here in the Raleigh Morrisville area. And thanks for sharing today.
Thank you, brother. Love it.